Commander Shira Chin stood on the bridge of the Use Valiant, watching the stars through the massive viewport. She was only 28 years old, but she had already made history. The youngest fleet commander humanity had ever produced. The officers around her moved with precise efficiency, and she felt pride in every one of them. Commander. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council, her communications officer announced. Kira straightened her uniform. This was it. The ceremony she had been waiting for. The Council was going to award her the Star of Unity, the highest military honor in known space. She had earned it by leading the defense against the Vraxian invasion 3 months ago. 12 species had fought together under her command, and they had won. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the 7 council members. They looked pleased, almost proud. Kira allowed herself a small smile, but that was 3 weeks ago. Everything had changed since then. Now, Kira sat in a transport shuttle, her uniform stripped of all rank insignia. She stared out the small window at the approaching station. Outpost Sigma 7 looked exactly as terrible as she had imagined. The station orbited a dead moon, its hull covered in patches and makeshift repairs. Several sections looked dark, probably without power. Destination reached, the shuttle's computer announced in a flat voice. Kira grabbed her single bag and walked to the airlock. The docking process was rough, the shuttle shaking as it connected. When the door opened, she stepped into a corridor that smelled like recycled air and disappointment. A tired-looking human officer waited for her. His uniform was wrinkled and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Commander Chun," he said, though her rank meant nothing now. "I'm Lieutenant Harris. Welcome to Sigma 7. Just Kira," she replied. "I'm not a commander anymore." Harris looked uncomfortable. "Right. Well, let me show you to your quarters and then the training facility." They walked through corridors that needed cleaning. The station was quiet except for distant voices and the hum of old machinery. Harris explained that Sigma 7 was where the galaxy sent its military failures, the ones who couldn't make it anywhere else. "We get about 50 new washouts every month," Harris said. "Most instructors last maybe 3 months before requesting transfer. The students don't want to be here, and they make sure everyone knows it." "What happened to the last instructor?" Kira asked. "He quit yesterday. Said he'd rather face a firing squad than another day with this group." They reached a large training bay. Through the window, Kira could see about 20 beings from different species. A massive Korthian sat in the corner, his species known across the galaxy as fearless warriors. But this one looked scared. A small Zentari was taking apart a training rifle, her 6 fingers moving quickly. A human pilot slumped against the wall, a flask poorly hidden in his jacket. "That's your class," Harris said. 23 total. "Good luck." Kira entered the training bay. The conversation stopped immediately. 23 pairs of eyes turned to look at her. Some looked curious. Most looked hostile. "I'm Kira Chun," she began. "I'll be your instructor." A Dravian in the back laughed. "You're the one who got kicked out for saving those primitives, right? The hero who fell from grace?" Others joined in the laughter. Kira felt her face heat up but kept her expression neutral. "That's right," she said. "I broke the rules to save 40,000 lives. And yes, I paid the price for it." "So now you're here to teach us losers?" A human woman asked. She had scars across her face and arms. "What makes you think you can fix us when everyone else failed?" "I don't think I can fix you," Kira replied honestly. "I think you can fix yourselves if someone actually believes you can." The large Korthian in the corner spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and shaky. "My name is Threx. My people are supposed to be warriors, but I'm afraid all the time. I freeze in combat. I'm a disgrace." "I'm Pip," the Zentari said, still holding pieces of the rifle. "They say I'm a thief, but I was just trying to make friends." One by one, others shared their stories. The pilot was named Marcus, and he could only fly when he was drunk. A Vesha named Vila had attacked her commanding officer. A young Zentari had hacked military databases looking for information about his missing brother. They were broken. All of them. And they had been sent here to be forgotten. Kira looked at each face. She saw pain, shame, and anger. But she also saw something else, potential. These weren't bad soldiers. They were soldiers who had been judged by rules that didn't fit them. Here's what I think, Kira said. The galaxy has a very specific idea about what makes a good soldier. Follow orders. Don't question. Fight the approved way. But sometimes the approved way is wrong. She thought about the Sara 4. The planet had been dying, its core collapsing. The Council had forbidden interference. They said it was natural, that humanity shouldn't play God. But Kira had seen the faces of those people, families, children. She had used human technology to stabilize the planet's core. She had saved 40,000 lives and destroyed her career in the same moment. I'm not here to make you into perfect soldiers, Kira continued. I'm here to help you become the soldiers you're meant to be. Not someone else's idea of a soldier, yours? That's a nice speech, Marcus slurred from his position against the wall. But speeches don't change anything. You're right, Kira agreed. So let's not waste time with speeches. Tomorrow we start training. And we're going to do things differently than you've ever done before. The room was silent. Some faces showed doubt. Others showed the tiniest spark of hope. That night, Kira lay in her small quarters staring at the ceiling. She had gone from commanding the most advanced warship in the fleet to teaching reject soldiers in a falling-apart station. The Council had taken everything from her. Her rank, her ship, her reputation, but they hadn't taken her belief that every person had value. That rules weren't more important than lives. She closed her eyes and thought about tomorrow. She had 23 misfits who didn't believe in themselves. The galaxy had given up on them, but Kira-chun never gave up on anyone. That was why she was here. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly where she needed to be. The first week was a complete disaster. On Monday, Kira tried to run a basic combat simulation. Half the class didn't show up. The ones who did showed up late. Threx, the Korthian who should have been a fierce warrior, hid in a supply closet when the simulation started. Marcus flew the training shuttle drunk and crashed it into a virtual asteroid within 2 minutes on Tuesday. Pip took apart 3 training weapons and reassembled them into something that looked like a sculpture. When Kira asked why, Pip explained that in Zentari culture you give gifts to people you respect. She had been trying to make something beautiful for Kira. But those aren't yours to take apart, Kira explained gently, Pip's large eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. Everyone just calls me a thief. No one explained. By Wednesday, Kira wanted to quit. She understood now why the previous instructors had left. The other staff members avoided her in the hallways. Lieutenant Harris gave her sympathetic looks but offered no help. This was her problem to solve. On Thursday morning, Kira changed her approach. Instead of running drills, she sat down with each student individually. She learned their real stories, not the official reports. Threx had been a good soldier once. He had led his unit into battle against Vraxian forces. But the Vraxians had ambushed them. Threx had watched his entire team die around him while he was trapped under debris, unable to help. He had survived, but the fear never left. Every combat situation brought back that memory. Marcus had been a brilliant pilot, the best in his squadron. But during a rescue mission, he had been forced to choose between saving his crew or saving civilians. He chose the civilians. His crew died. He started drinking to forget their faces. Now he could only fly when he was too numb to remember Dovila, the Theshan who had attacked her officer, had done it to protect another soldier from abuse. But no one had believed her. She had been labeled violent and unstable. Every story was like this: pain, trauma, choices that haunted them. The galaxy had judged them all as failures and sent them here to be forgotten. You're not broken, Kira told each of them. You're wounded. And there's a difference. By Friday, something small had shifted. A few more students showed up on time. Threx came out of the closet, though he still wouldn't participate in combat drills. Pip stopped taking things apart without asking. The real change came 2 weeks later. Kira was reviewing. Supply reports when Lieutenant Harris burst into her office. "There's a distress call," he said. Out of breath. "Merchant vessel under attack by pirates. They're only 30 minutes away." "Alert the station commander," Kira said, standing up. "I did." He said, "It's not our jurisdiction." "Not our problem." Kira felt anger flash through her. Not their problem. Just like the Sara 4 hadn't been her problem. According to the council, she made a decision that would probably get her court-martialed. Again. "Tell my students to meet me in Bay 7, now." 20 minutes later, Kira stood in front of her class in the launch bay. Behind her was an old training frigate that was supposed to be decommissioned. She had convinced the bay chief to power it up. "There are people dying 30 minutes from here," she said. "The station won't help them." "I'm going to." "Anyone who wants to come with me, get on board. Anyone who doesn't, I understand." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Threx stood up. His hands were shaking, but he walked toward the ship. "I'm tired of being afraid," he said. Pip followed. Then Marcus. Then Vila. One by one, all 23 misfits boarded the ship. The flight was tense. The old frigate shook and rattled. Marcus, surprisingly sober, piloted with steady hands. When they arrived, they saw the merchant vessel surrounded by 3 pirate ships. The merchant's shields were failing. "What's the plan?" Vila asked. Kira realized she didn't have one. She had acted on instinct, like always. But looking at her students, she saw something that gave her an idea. "We're going to do what we do best," she said. "We're going to improvise." The pirates had better ships and more firepower. But they weren't expecting a training frigate full of crazy people. Marcus flew in patterns that made no sense, drunk-style flying while sober. The pirates couldn't predict his movements. Pip had jury-rigged the weapon systems in ways that shouldn't work but did. Vila took control of communications and started broadcasting, confusing signals that made the pirates think there were more ships incoming, and Threx did something no one expected. When one of the pirate ships grappled onto the merchant vessel, Threx volunteered to spacewalk over and manually release the clamps. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "But those people need help? And I'm tired of letting fear control me." Kira watched through the viewport as the massive Korthian pulled himself along the cable between ships. His hands were shaking, but he didn't stop. He reached the clamps and started working, his engineering training taking over. The pirates opened fire. Energy bolts flashed through space. One hit close to Threx, making him flinch. But he kept working. "Come on, Threx," Pip whispered. "You can do it." The clamp released. Threx pushed off and started pulling himself back. The merchant vessel's engines fired, pulling away from the pirates. Marcus swooped the frigate in, weapons blazing. The pirates, realizing this was more trouble than it was worth, retreated. 200 civilians were safe. When they returned to Sigma 7, Kira expected to be arrested. Instead, she found her students celebrating. Threx was surrounded by the others, all of them congratulating him. He had faced his fear, and Marcus was smiling for the first time since Kira met him. "I flew sober," he said, amazed. "I flew sober and we didn't die." Pip had created some kind of metal out of spare parts and hung it around Kira's neck. "For the best teacher," she said. Vila approached Kira quietly. "You gave up everything for people you didn't know on the Sara 4. Now you're risking what you have left for us." "Why?" Kira thought about it. "Because everyone deserves someone who believes in them. The galaxy gave up on you." "I won't." That night, the students didn't go back to their quarters. They stayed in the training bay, talking and laughing. For the first time since arriving at Sigma 7, they looked like soldiers. Like a team, Lieutenant Harris found Kira later. "The station commander is furious." "There's going to be an investigation." "I know," Kira said. "But the merchant captain sent a message to the council. He named every one of your students as heroes. The news channels are picking it up." Kira felt a small smile for him. Maybe there would be consequences. Probably there would. But 23 people who thought they were worthless now knew they had value. 23 misfits had saved 200 lives. That was worth any price. News of the rescue. spread faster than Kira expected. Within a week, she started receiving transfer requests. Misfits from other stations wanted to join Sigma 7. Soldiers who had been labeled as problems, failures, or discipline cases were asking to learn from her. The station commander tried to refuse them, but the request came with support from their homeworlds. Families who wanted their children to have another chance. Officers who secretly believed some of their best people had been judged unfairly. Within 3 months, Kira had over 50 students. The station, which had been half empty, suddenly felt alive. The training bays ran exercises around the clock. The mess hall filled with conversations in a dozen languages. Pip had started an engineering club that met every evening, taking apart and rebuilding equipment in creative ways. Threx led morning combat training. He still got scared, but he taught others how to fight through fear instead of letting it control them. Marcus ran flight simulations, teaching pilots that unpredictable flying could be a tactical advantage, but not everyone was happy about the changes. The Galactic Council noticed what was happening at Sigma 7. They saw a disgraced human commander teaching soldiers to break rules and think independently. They saw discipline problems turning into effective units, and they didn't like it. Admiral Vorsek arrived on a Tuesday morning without warning. Kira was running a training exercise when Lieutenant Harris rushed in. The council sent an inspector. Admiral Vorsek. He's Theshan. Kira's stomach dropped. The Theshans were known for being rigid, traditional, and obsessed with proper military protocol. They believed there was a right way to do everything, and any deviation was unacceptable. Admiral Vorsek was exactly what Kira expected. Tall, slim, with crystalline features that looked like they had been carved from ice. His uniform was perfect. Every metal placed exactly right. He looked at Sigma 7 like it was a disease. Commander Chun, he said, his voice cold. Or should I say former Commander Chun? Just Kira is fine, Admiral. I prefer to use proper titles. He looked around the training bay. Pip's engineering club had built what looked like a functional robot out of spare parts. Marcus was teaching a pilot to fly while blindfolded, using only instruments. Threx was leading a meditation session about controlling fear. This is chaos, Vorsek said. This is not how military training is conducted. It works for them, Kira replied. Does it? Vorsek pulled out a datapad. I am here to evaluate your program. In 1 week, your students will face an examination. A war game against proper military units. 200 elite council troops against your 50 misfits. When you fail, this program will be shut down, and these soldiers will be discharged permanently. Kira felt her students watching. She saw worry on their faces. Pip's antennae drooped. Threx's hands started shaking. We accept, Kira said. When do we start? You have 3 days to prepare. The war game will last 1 week. Capture the flag scenario. Orbital combat, ground assault, and tactical planning. All standard procedures will apply. After Vorsek left, Kira gathered her students. They looked defeated before they even started. We can't beat elite troops, Vila said. They're trained, disciplined, and they have better equipment. You're right, Kira agreed. We can't beat them at their game, so we won't play their game. For 3 days, Kira worked with her students on something the galaxy had never seen before. Not a traditional battle plan, but an approach based on unpredictability, creativity, and using their so-called weaknesses as strengths. The war game began on Monday morning. Both sides started in orbital positions around the moon. The goal was to capture a flag placed on the moon's surface. Standard military doctrine said to establish orbital superiority first, then land ground forces. Admiral Vorsek watched from the command center, confident. His elite troops moved in perfect formation. They followed textbook strategies that had won battles for centuries. Kira's misfits did something else entirely. Marcus's flight wing didn't try to fight for orbital control. Instead, they flew in crazy patterns, pulling the elite fighters away from the main battle. They flew like they were broken, damaged, afraid. The elite pilots pursued, trying to get easy kills. Meanwhile, Pip's engineering team had done something that wasn't technically in the rules but wasn't forbidden either. They had added debris fields to the simulation, creating obstacles that changed the battlefield. The elite troops used to clean combat zones, struggled to adapt. On the ground, Threx led a unit that used his fear as a tactic. They retreated, looked weak, drew the enemy deep into disadvantageous positions. Then they sprang traps that no one saw coming because no proper military unit would deliberately appear so vulnerable. Velas Communications team hacked the simulation in creative ways. Not cheating, exactly, but using the system's own rules against itself. They created ghost signals, made their 50 troops look like 500, sent false retreat orders that confused the enemy. Admiral Vorsek watched with growing anger. "This is not proper military conduct," he said. "Is it against the rules?" Kira asked. "It's against the spirit of the rules, but not the rules themselves." The war game lasted 6 days. Kira's misfits lost many individual battles. The elite troops won most direct engagements. But war wasn't about winning every battle. It was about winning the war on the final day. While the elite troops were congratulating themselves on their tactical victories, Pip's team slipped 3 soldiers through a gap in their perimeter that existed only because the elite troops were following standard formations. Those 3 soldiers reached the flag while the elite 200 were busy fighting ghosts and pursuing decoys. The simulation ended. Outpost Sigma 7 had won. The command center was silent. Admiral Vorsek stared at the results like they were personally offensive. "You cheated," he finally said. "We adapted," Kira corrected. "We used unconventional tactics against a conventional enemy." Isn't that what military strategy is supposed to be about? Finding ways to win even when you're outmatched? This is not how wars are fought. Maybe that's the problem. Vorsek stepped close to Kira, his crystalline features hard. "I will recommend to the council that you be court-martialed. This program will be shut down, your students will be discharged, and you will never work in a military capacity again." He left without another word. Kira's students gathered around her, their victory feeling hollow now. "It's not fair," Pip said. "We won." "We did," Kira agreed. "And that's what matters." But that night, lying in her quarters, Kira wondered if she had made things worse. She had given these soldiers hope, shown them they had value. Now the council was going to take it all away. Then her communicator buzzed. A message from an unknown source. She opened it and found a video message from a young officer. He was Deshan, like Admiral Vorsek, but his eyes were different, excited. "Commander Chun, you don't know me. I'm Lieutenant Kalex. I was one of the elite troops in the war game. We lost, and I'm glad we did. You showed us that there's more than one way to be a good soldier. Some of us have been talking. We want to learn what you're teaching. Please don't give up." More messages came. From officers across the galaxy. From soldiers who were tired of rigid rules that didn't work. From people who had watched the war game results and realized that maybe the old ways weren't the only ways. Something was changing. Kira had embarrassed the council, true. But she had also shown thousands of soldiers that creativity could defeat conformity. That sometimes the misfits saw solutions that the perfect soldiers missed. The Galactic Council could shut down her program. They could court-martial her again. But they couldn't stop an idea. And the idea that there was more than one way to be a soldier was spreading faster than they could. Control. Kira smiled in the darkness of her quarters. Whatever came next, it would be worth it. The Vraxians returned during the council's debate about what to do with Kira. They struck 3 systems in 2 weeks. Each attack was devastating. The council sent their best fleets, their most decorated commanders, their elite troops. Every response followed perfect military doctrine. Every strategy came from proven tactics, and they lost every single battle. The Vraxians had spent years studying council military procedures. They knew every standard formation, every textbook strategy, every approved tactic. They predicted every move before it happened and countered it perfectly. It was like fighting an enemy who had read all your plans. Within a month, 15 systems had fallen. Millions were dead or displaced. The Council's perfect military machine was being destroyed by an enemy that had learned to beat perfection. Kira watched the reports from Sigma 7, feeling helpless. Her court-martial had been postponed because of the crisis, but she had no ship, no command. No way to help. Then Admiral Vorsek appeared at her door. He looked different, tired, older. The rigid perfection in his posture had cracked. "Commander Chun," he said, using her old rank. "The Council has devised a desperate measure. Operation Misfit. They want you to take command of a fleet?" Kira felt hope spark. "A real fleet?" "Not exactly." Vorsek pulled up a holographic display. 5,000 washouts from across the galaxy. 30 outdated ships that were scheduled for decommissioning. Limited supplies and support. The Council is calling it a distraction force. Something to draw Vraxian attention while the real fleets regroup. "They expect us to fail," Kira said. "They expect you to die." Vorsek met her eyes. "But I watched your misfits defeat my elite troops. I've watched the Vraxians defeat our best commanders. And I've realized something. The galaxy has been fighting the same way for so long that we've become predictable. The Vraxians studied us and learned to beat us. But they've never seen what you do." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost him. "I believe there was only one right way to be a soldier. But watching good people die because they followed the book exactly makes me wonder if the book is wrong." Kira studied the fleet composition. 5,000 misfits. Soldiers with trauma, addiction, fear, anger, all the problems that made them unsuitable for regular service. 30 ships that should have been scrapped? It was suicide. It was also exactly what she needed. "I accept," she said. "But I choose my own staff. And the Council doesn't interfere with how I run things." "Agreed. You have 2 weeks to assemble your fleet and make it functional. Then you deploy to the Bellis cluster. That's where the Vraxians are gathering for their next major offensive." The next 2 weeks were chaos. 5,000 misfits arrived at Sigma 7 from across the galaxy. Some came in chains, still under discipline charges. Others came voluntarily, having heard about what Kira was doing. There were species that had never worked together. Soldiers with records so bad they made Threx and Pip look like model troops. Kira promoted her original students to leadership positions. Threx became her ground combat commander. Pip led engineering and technical operations. Marcus took charge of flight operations. Vila ran intelligence and communications. They started training immediately. But this wasn't traditional training. Kira taught them to think creatively, to break standard formations, to treat chaos as an advantage. She taught them that their problems weren't weaknesses if they learned to use them right. A soldier with anxiety could spot dangers others missed. Someone with trust issues made an excellent counterintelligence officer. A pilot who couldn't follow orders might be the one who survived because they zigged when doctrine said to zag. "The Vraxians studied the Council's military for years," Kira told her commanders. "They know every move in the book. So we're not using the book. We're making this up as we go." Some of the newcomers thought she was crazy. Others thought she was brilliant. Most just wanted a chance to prove they weren't worthless. Kira introduced concepts the galaxy had never militarized. Psychological warfare. Deliberate misinformation. Tactical unpredictability as official doctrine. She gave low-ranking soldiers authority to ignore orders if they saw a better option. She encouraged chaos. "You're teaching them to be undisciplined," one of the arriving officers complained. "I'm teaching them to adapt," Kira corrected. "Discipline is important, but so is creativity." The galaxy forgot that. 2 weeks later, Operation Misfit deployed to the Bellis cluster. 30 ships carrying 5,000 misfits. The Council's main fleets watched from a distance, ready to retreat if the Vraxians overwhelmed Kira's force. Admiral Vorsek commanded one of those fleets. He watched the deployment with mixed feelings. He had given these misfits a chance, but he expected to watch them die. The Vraxian fleet was massive. 80 warships, all more advanced than anything Kira commanded. They moved in perfect formation. Their tactics precise and proven. They expected the humans to follow standard engagement protocols. Establish a defensive perimeter. Call for reinforcements. Try to delay while evacuating civilians. Instead, Kira's fleet did something insane. They split into 6 groups and attacked from completely different directions. No coordinated assault. No unified strategy. Each group fought independently, making decisions on the fly. Marcus's flight wing performed maneuvers that looked suicidal. They flew too close to asteroids, used gravity wells in ways that shouldn't work, and changed direction randomly. Vrexian fighters couldn't predict them, because there was no pattern to predict. Pip's engineering teams had modified their ships in ways that violated every safety regulation. They could reroute power faster, sacrifice shields for weapons, or reverse the process instantly. The Vraxians would adjust for one configuration, and suddenly it changed. Threx led boarding actions on 2 Vraxian ships. His teams didn't follow standard boarding procedures. They came from unexpected directions, split up when Doctrine said to stay together, and used fear as a weapon. They acted like they were losing even when they were winning, drawing Vraxians into traps. Vila's intelligence unit fed false information to the Vraxians through hacked channels. They made 5,000 troops look like 15,000. They broadcast retreat orders that weren't real. They created ghost signals that made the Vraxians think reinforcements were coming from empty space. The battle lasted 8 hours. It was messy, chaotic, and nothing like a proper military engagement. Kira lost 3 ships and over 200 troops. But when the smoke cleared, the Vraxian fleet was retreating. For the first time since the invasion began, the Council had won a major battle. Admiral Vorsek stared at the results in disbelief. "How?" he whispered. His communications officer looked equally stunned. "Sir, I think they won because they didn't fight like us. The Vraxians couldn't predict them because there was nothing to predict. Every ship did something different. Every tactic violated what we'd normally do." Vorsek understood then what Kira had been trying to show him. The Council had become so focused on perfection that they had become predictable. They had forgotten that sometimes the best strategy was no strategy at all. Messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Military channels that had dismissed Operation Misfit as a suicide mission were now demanding details. How had the Misfits won? What tactics had they used? Could it be replicated? Kira sat on the bridge of her flagship, exhausted. They had won, but the cost was heavy. Good people had died. Pip was in medical with serious injuries from an explosion. Several of her students would never fight again. But they had proven something important. The galaxy's misfits weren't useless. They were just fighting a battle the galaxy didn't understand yet. "Commander," Threx said, his voice steady despite his fear. "The Council is sending new orders. They want us to continue the offensive. We're not a distraction force anymore. We're the tip of the spear." Kira looked at her ragtag fleet. Damaged ships? Wounded soldiers. Misfits who had become heroes. "Then we'd better get ready," she said. "Because the Vraxians just learned we exist. Next time they'll be expecting us." 6 months changed the galaxy. Operation Misfit pushed the Vraxians back system by system. Each battle was different. Each victory came from improvisation and creativity. Traditional Council fleets learned to work alongside Kira's Misfits, combining discipline with unpredictability. The combination was devastating. Kira's reputation transformed. No longer the disgraced commander, she became known as the Chaos Admiral. The human who taught the galaxy that perfection wasn't as powerful as adaptation. Young officers from dozens of species requested transfers to her fleet. Even some elite troops asked to learn her methods, but the Vraxians were learning too. After their defeat at Bellis Cluster, they started adapting. They couldn't predict Kira's tactics, but they could prepare for unpredictability itself. They built redundant systems. They trained their troops to respond to chaos rather than follow rigid plans. They were becoming what the galaxy had been before it got comfortable with its perfect military doctrine. The final confrontation came at Vraxian Prime. The enemy homeworld. The Council wanted a traditional siege. Surround the planet, cut off supplies, force surrender. It would take months and cost countless lives, but it was the proven method. Kira proposed something else. Something so crazy that half the Council thought she had lost her mind. I want to broadcast our entire battle plan to the Vraxians in advance, she said during the command briefing. Admiral Vorsek, who now openly supported her methods, looked concerned. You want to tell them exactly what we're going to do? Yes, every detail. Fleet positions, attack vectors, timing, everything. That's suicide. It would be if we actually followed that plan. Kira pulled up tactical displays. The Vraxians have spent months learning to expect the unexpected from us. They've adapted to our chaos. So we're going to do something they'll never expect. We're going to be predictable. Or at least we're going to make them think we're being predictable. Threx understood first. We broadcast a perfect traditional battle plan. They prepare to counter it. Then we do something completely different. Exactly. They've learned to predict our unpredictability. So we make them overthink. They'll spend so much time preparing for the fake plan and preparing for us to deviate from it that they won't know how to respond when we do something else entirely. The Council approved the plan, though many members had doubts. 3 days before the assault, Kira broadcast the entire operation to the Vraxian leadership. Every ship position, every attack window, every tactical objective, the Vraxians received the transmission and immediately started analyzing it. Their military computers processed thousands of scenarios. What if the plan was real? What if it was a trick? What if parts were real and parts were fake? They prepared for every possibility, but they couldn't prepare for what Kira actually did. The battle began exactly as the broadcast plan described. Kira's fleet moved into the predicted positions. They followed the standard engagement procedures she had outlined. For 3 hours, everything went according to the plan she had revealed. The Vraxians were confused but ready. They had prepared counters for the broadcast plan and alternatives for potential deviations. They were waiting for the chaos to start. Then Kira did something neither the Vraxians nor the Council expected. She surrendered. Her entire fleet broadcast surrender signals. Ships powered down weapons. They began retreating in disorder, appearing to flee in panic. What are you doing? A Council admiral demanded over the comm channel. Trust me, Kira replied. The Vraxians saw the retreat and made a decision. This was their chance to destroy the Chaos Admiral's fleet. They pursued aggressively, breaking their defensive formations around the planet. That was when the real attack began, while the Vraxians had been studying Kira's broadcast plan. Pip's engineering teams had been working on something else. They had modified 100 small craft to look like cargo ships, refugees, debris. Pieces of the battle that no one would pay attention to. Those craft had been drifting toward Vraxian Prime for days, hiding in plain sight. When Kira's fleet retreated, those craft activated. They weren't bombs. They were something more creative. Each craft contained advanced hacking systems Pip had designed. They activated simultaneously, targeting Vraxian planetary defense systems. Not to destroy them, but to confuse them. To make the defenses see threats that weren't there, to report attacks from empty space, to create sensor chaos while the Vraxian fleet chased. Kira's fleeing ships and their planetary defenses fought ghost attacks. Threx led a small force of ground troops on a surgical strike. They landed on the planet in the confusion, heading for a single target, the Vraxian Military Command Center. The battle was brutal. Threx's team faced heavy resistance. But they had learned from their time with Kira. They didn't fight like traditional soldiers. They used fear as a weapon, appearing weak to draw enemies into traps. They broke every rule about proper unit cohesion, splitting up and rejoining in ways that confused their opponents. Threx himself led the final assault on the command center. He was terrified the entire time. His hands shook as he planted charges. His breath came in gasps as enemy fire streaked past him. But he didn't let the fear stop him. The command center exploded just as the Vraxian fleet realized they had been tricked. Pip's hacking systems activated a final program, broadcasting a message across all Vraxian channels. Surrender terms? Generous ones. The alternative was having their entire command infrastructure destroyed. The Vraxian leadership surrendered. Not because they were defeated militarily, but because Kira had made them defeat themselves. They had spent so much time trying to predict her that they couldn't react when she did something simple and direct, but victory came with a price. Threx died in the command center explosion. The charges detonated earlier than planned, and he was still inside. His last transmission was simple: mission accomplished. Don't let fear win. Pip survived her injuries at Bellis Cluster, but she would never serve in combat again. The explosion had damaged her too badly. She retired to teach engineering at the new academy. Marcus finally stopped drinking, but the memories still haunted him. He became an instructor, teaching pilots that survival sometimes meant breaking the rules. 273 of Kira's Misfits died during the 6-month campaign. Each loss hurt like losing family. The council held a ceremony after the war. They offered Kira a position as Supreme Fleet Commander. They offered medals, promotions, restoration of her rank and reputation. They offered her everything they had taken away. Kira stood before the council, looking at the beings who had once called her a disgrace. They wanted her now because she was useful, but nothing fundamental had changed in how they thought. I decline, she said. The council chamber erupted in surprise. Admiral Vorsek looked shocked. Commander Chun, you've earned this. You've proven yourself beyond any doubt. I proved that there's more than one way to be a soldier. But if I take a position in the traditional command structure, I'll just become part of the system that creates misfits in the first place. Kira looked at each council member. I want to return to Outpost Sigma 7, make it an official academy. Let me train the next generation of soldiers who don't fit your perfect molds. You'd choose that over Supreme Command? A counselor asked. I would choose that over anything, because those misfits saved the galaxy, and there are thousands more out there who just need someone to believe in them. The council debated for 3 days. Finally, they agreed. Outpost Sigma 7 became the Sigma Academy for Adaptive Military Strategy. It would take soldiers that other programs rejected and teach them to turn their differences into strengths. Kira stood outside the academy on opening day, watching new students arrive. They looked scared, ashamed, angry. They were young soldiers who had failed standard training, officers with trauma, pilots who couldn't follow standard protocols, engineers who thought differently. They were misfits. Just like her first class, one student approached nervously. She was human, young, with scars on her arms that suggested she had been through something terrible. Commander Chun? The girl asked. I'm Private Yuki Tanaka. I was dishonorably discharged for freezing during combat. They said I'm not soldier material. But I heard about what you did, about how you helped people like me. Kira looked at the scared young woman and saw herself. Saw Threx, saw every student who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Welcome to Sigma Academy, Private Tanaka. You're not here because you failed. You're here because you failed their way. Now let's find yours. The girl's eyes filled with tears. You really think I can be a soldier? I think you can be whatever kind of soldier you're meant to be. Not someone else's idea of a soldier, yours. More students gathered around. Aliens from across the galaxy. Humans from different colonies. All of them carrying the weight of failure. All of them looking for a second chance. Kira looked at them and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not for herself, but for them. For a galaxy that was slowly learning that perfect soldiers weren't as valuable as adaptable ones. Inside the academy, a memorial wall bore the names of those who had died during Operation Misfit. Threx's name was first. Pip had created it herself before retiring, using pieces of equipment from their first training exercises together. Under the names was an inscription. They were told they weren't good enough. They proved everyone wrong. Remember them not for how they fell, but for how they rose? Kira touched Threx's name gently. We did it, she whispered. We changed everything. That night, as the new students settled into their quarters and the station hummed with nervous energy, Kira stood at a viewport looking at the stars. She had been the youngest fleet commander in history. She had been disgraced, exiled, stripped of everything. And she had changed the galaxy. Not by being perfect, but by being willing to see value where others saw failure. By understanding that sometimes the most dangerous warriors weren't the ones who never fell, but the ones who got back up and refused to fight by the rules that broke them. Her communicator buzzed. Admiral Vorsek, calling to congratulate her on the Academy's opening. "You could have been Supreme Commander," he said. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Kira replied, "Training misfits instead of commanding fleets? Training tomorrow's heroes. They just don't know it yet." Vorsek was silent for a moment. Then, "You've taught the galaxy a valuable lesson, Commander Chun. I hope we're wise enough to remember it. We'll see. Change is slow. But it starts with one person believing that different doesn't mean wrong." After the call ended, Kira returned to watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was still fighting wars, but now they fought differently. More creatively, more adaptively. Because a disgraced human commander and her army of misfits had proven that chaos could defeat perfection. Tomorrow, she would start teaching again. New students who thought they were failures. Young soldiers who needed someone to believe in them. And Kira-shan, the girl no one expected, would show them exactly what she had shown the galaxy, that sometimes being a misfit was the greatest strength of all.